This is Dr. Otto Janke for the Empire Longevity Podcast. I love the idea of people who take their bodies and therefore their mentalities to different areas and their emotions to different areas because of the sports they do. So I reached out to someone who has run Boston Marathon, has run a number of marathons. We'll dive into that a little bit. And the closest person I could find who I could really quite speak openly about it was my cousin. This is my cugino, Stuart Palczak, all the way from Amsterdam, New York. Stu, what's going on today?
Rams in the house. We're ready to go.
Damn that Ram. Let's start off with a couple things. When did you graduate high school?
I am a AHS, Amsterdam High School, 1983 grad, UAlbany, 87 undergrad, 88 grad. So public school all the way, baby.
Were you a runner in high school?
My sport in high school was wrestling. And so I did run, both for endurance and weight control, but that was not my sport. I was not a track or cross country athlete in high school.
Not in college either.
No, not at all. No.
And so when did you say, okay, so you were running all that time, even in college, you're running just for fun also?
Yeah, I the best you could say, I sort of dabbled in running. I was never really serious about it. I ran. I don't know how much benefit it gave me because I was inconsistent.
Okay.
So maybe my late 20s-ish, I started running a little bit more seriously, and I ran a race, and I did reasonably well. But then I started talking to some people I knew.
What was the distance of the race?
It was a 5K.
5K.
Or 5 miler, 5K, 5 miler. It was a 5 miler, and I started talking to some of the people who ran it, who I knew. It was a local race, and they encouraged me to join a local running club, so I did. And I began to see people who were, I didn't think amazing athletes or amazing runners, just regular people, training pretty hard and running marathons. And I decided at some point, if they could do it, if that guy can do it, I can do it. And so that's how I started.
Hey, that guy flew a plane. I can fly.
I guess that's how I've been inspiration to people. They said, if he can do it, then we could do it.
So how long after that first 5 miler did you decide, let's go run a marathon?
I probably, I would say maybe 4 years-ish. All right.
That's a short time.
Building up to it. Yeah, I would say in the neighborhood of 4 years or so.
So you plan out, let's say a year in advance or 6 months, 8 months in advance before you say, okay, I'm going to run a marathon.
Usually, I've been sort of, although I've done many marathons, I haven't done all that many different ones. I've done one that's local. It starts in Schenectady, ends in Albany. I've done Boston. I've done New York. I've run one in Lake Placid. I've run in Burlington, Vermont. But so the time frame for the logistics of some of them is maybe longer than a year.
Huh.
That being said, my planning of my training isn't at this point doesn't take that long. I start with the marathon date and I work backwards on what I need to do.
Right.
So I ran Boston in April. Maybe my serious training, I started turning my mindset and my eating and sleeping habits changing a little bit around the first of the year. And then probably February 1st is when I was in training mode.
So let's go back a year and you say, okay, I'm going to run a marathon.
Yep.
And at this time you know what's ahead of you. When you first started to do this, did you follow a guidebook? Did you follow some people who had ideas for you, or you train with other people?
Yeah. When I first did it, I did with some friends who had met through this running group who were pretty veteran marathoners. And I really put my trust in their experience. And really, the template I got from them, I've sort of used, 25 years later, I'm still using the same template.
And it's effective for you.
I don't know how effective it is, but it's worked for, it's what's worked for me.
We haven't beat any Kenyans yet, but
Well, technically I have, because the big shots, if they're not going to win, drop out of a marathon. So I
Really?
may have. Oh yeah, often if you're running for a living, if today's not your day, you live to run another day. So they often drop out.
Really?
Yeah.
We learn something new every single
Yeah.
day.
So Bill Rogers, I beat Bill Rogers at Boston once. All right, that's my claim to fame.
Hey, get out, Rogers. All right. So you start off with the idea, okay, I'm gonna run Boston. You already know when Boston's coming up. That's a big one. And does your diet change along the way?
Yeah, I begin to. I generally I'll stop drinking soda. Okay, maybe 3 4 months out. That always makes me feel better. Uh, you don't take in all that what I think are empty calories, and I begin to
Sure.
just watch uh, maybe how I may snack and consume in that way. I don't really change a lot about what I eat, but I change in what I don't eat.
Huh.
I try to keep the extras out.
Huh. That's interesting. And then your training changes. What else changes? Your sleep patterns?
When I'm in training, my volume intensity training changes, and then my sleep changes because I began to conk out earlier at night. You're
Sure.
getting up earlier,
Sure.
so you're working hard in the morning. Generally, I train before school, and so you're working hard in the morning, and then so often I conk out at night.
So
All I
you
have to do is sit down for about 30 seconds, and boom.
the magic of it. So getting up in the morning, what time would you typically on a non-running day get up?
On a non-running day, honestly, I don't have many of those, but maybe I would get up 5:30 to 6 o'clock.
And then
All
our
right.
train. So Boston's coming up. You have a training day for Boston. What
If
time do you
I'm
get
gonna
that?
work hard in the morning, I'm probably up at 4:30. Yeah.
And how many miles are you going to put in then?
Well, if it's before school, I can't do much more than an hour to an hour and 15 minutes. So if I'm working hard, I've never done before school more than 10 miles. As little as 4, as much as 10, depending on what's in my plan.
Right. Right. And that's in Amsterdam, New York, where you might be having any kind of weather during that time.
Yeah, yeah, it was fun this winter. Yeah, it's you're out, and I try to stay off the treadmill as much as I can. I don't go on the treadmill, so you're outside and it's cold out and it's snowing out, but once you're ready, once you're dressed for it, it's all good.
What's the I mean, you're going to say there's just a massive difference. What's going to be the difference between the treadmill versus road work?
For me, I think when I've trained on a treadmill, I've gotten lazy. I've been able to sort of make the challenges less challenging. And also, I think it's been better on my body. Training on the road, for me, is worked better on my body than the treadmill. For whatever reason, I can't explain that.
Huh. Why do you think? Because you're indoors, there's almost a security of where you're going and how you're running and the speed and everything. While there's
I can control everything. I can
right,
watch the TV.
right,
Uh, I control the weather. I can control my speed. When they're outside, I can control the grade.
right.
Outside, all these things are different. Plus, you're out in the elements, which I think is important to be able to prepare to face, even if it's cold and rainy out. Okay, because it was cold and rainy in Boston this year, so you got to be
Right.
ready to go.
Right. Right. So you start running, you go along the way. Have you ever gone to a point where you said, I shouldn't run that marathon?
Besides every single one,
Yeah. I mean, do you get to a
yeah.
point where you're like, oh no, man, I shouldn't.
I'll tell you, the last couple weeks this year before Boston, it was really grating on me. I was just ready to be done with it. I was getting up and putting the mileage in, and I was just ready to be done. I was really happy. Race day, I was really happy to be done with the training. I was. Yeah, sometimes it gets to you. I've never, at this point, you never know, registered and planned for a marathon and not done that race yet. But you never know. Things happen.
Things happen. Things happen. Have you ever gone into a race with an injury you were concerned about, or is it just that's part of the game?
It's part of the game, but the injuries I've been most concerned about is I've had a tendonitis issue that's cropped up in my left foot and the ankle, and I'm looking at it now. And it's just I've been able to manage it. But I was concerned about it, but work with our high school trainer, and she was a great help. And I've been doing rehab constantly, just trying to manage it. And knock on wood, that's been the biggest challenge I've had physically.
So when you get to and so you're going to Boston, and let's take Boston because it's the easiest one to think about. You get there the day before or 2 days before?
We got there. It's run on Monday. We got there this year on Saturday. That's been typical for me. 2 days before.
And what happens? So you have to go check in. Then what?
Check in where you're staying. You have to go to what they call the expo. Get your bib number. Check in there. They have all sorts of vendors. It's a pretty festive atmosphere. Maybe take in the sights, go to finish line, take your picture, take in the sights of the day, and then the next day, Sunday, pretty much do the same thing. Maybe there's some friends in town. Meet, go out, make sure you have a nice dinner both nights, and then ready to roll on Monday morning.
What time do you have dinner at, though?
It depends. It's never ideal. This year it was probably 6:30. I probably would like to eat earlier, but it's not just you that's there. You have to consider you're there with friends and family, and there's other people to consider. So,
what time's the race officially start?
The race, Boston's done in waves. All right,
Right.
There's so many people running, and they started. So my wave this year started at 10:25, but I had to get on a bus to the start, so I had to be in the finish line area by about 7:30.
7:30.
Yeah.
And then they put you into. So where do you go from there?
Oh man, it's like a cruel joke. You get on a bus, you drive 45 minutes, they kick you out and say run back. Basically, they bring you to a little village called Hopkinton, Mass. They drop you off at the high school. You congregate there to a certain time. Then they call you by your start time, and you walk maybe a half mile to the starting line.
Oh,
and you start. Your wave starts.
So everybody starts at the same starting line.
Everybody starts the same. Your time begins everybody starts the same starting line. Yep.
And you're all chipped.
You're all chipped. It's in your bib.
So you start and you're going. Are you super anxious, nervous, happy, energized? What's the emotions going on from the time you get on the bus to the time that gun goes?
Yes, and yes. All of it.
Sure.
It's you've put in a lot of time for this. All marathons. Boston's considered the one you want to go to. If
right.
you meet a marathoner, the question is, have you ever done Boston?
Right.
And so you go through that range of emotions. You get on the bus, you're talking to people, maybe you're with friends. As you get closer, the more veterans, and I've been fortunate to be at Boston multiple times, it doesn't phase you, but the newbies, you could tell, begin to get a little bit more anxious and nervous. And so, you get to the starting line, the race starts. And for me, Boston, so many people are out having a good time. It's a big party, it's a big celebration,
right.
And they cheer for you as loud as they cheer for the guy in first or the gal in first. It's almost like I smile the whole time because it's so much fun. And then the kids are out, they want to slap you five. You pass Wellesley College about the halfway mark, and the girls at the school are going crazy. It's a real big festive atmosphere, and I smile the whole time. Now, I know at a certain point that there's a point coming where it's not going to be as much fun. All right. And so you smile, but it's not as much fun anymore.
So your first time you run, you're so gassed up, ready to go. Do you burn yourself out in the first 5 miles?
It could hurt you if, again, especially at Boston, where it begins with a decline. And so your miles it's a slight decline. So your miles, you could really click off some fast miles.
Right.
And if you're not careful, the back half of the race will really, so the excitement of the race and the fact that it's a really runners friendly course for the first half the race could really become difficult in the back half of the race. And even though I know it, it still
Right.
hasn't. I still have fallen. I've fallen into that trap. Even I'm running. I'm saying to myself, "You are going too fast for yourself. Slow down." And no, I'm waving. I'm running. I'm having a good time. And I know I'm doing wrong, but you can't. Sometimes the emotions get the better of you.
Having some ice cream cones, some
Yeah,
Italian nights along the way.
maybe today's my day.
Here we go. So you're out there, and as we do, we watch you. We track you on the
Yep. Yeah, that's fun.
On the app. We watch you putting in the miles, and you get there, especially your first couple times. You don't really know exactly where you're at along the way. You have kind of an idea. What's your thinking for the first half of a marathon?
The first half, I'm just thinking, try to keep to the plan. I have a plan. Try to stick to the plan. Relax. If you don't feel great, that's okay, because this race is long enough to recover. If you're feeling really good, relax, because this race is long enough for the wheels to fall off. And all those, I'm fortunate because all those things have happened to me. I've had good runs, I've had not so good runs, and I've had mediocre runs, but I've been fortunate enough to be able to have the experience where whatever I'm feeling in that first half, this has happened to me before. And so I'm able to deal with it.
You have you have a watch. You're timing yourself.
I do. So I have a watch now. It's GPS watch, so it gives you every mile right away. It splits gives you a mile split. That's how I do it.
Wow. How beneficial is that?
It helps. Yeah.
So you're going out and you're like, man, I feel great, but you're going out too fast.
You know it. Yeah. So I try to, all right, that self-talk, all right, idiot, slow down, all right, relax, slow down, and you do your best.
So what was the time difference between a great run and a not so great run?
My worst Boston was a little bit over 3 hours and 50 minutes. My best Boston, 3:52, maybe 3:54. My best Boston was, I think, 3:08. And so more recently, I've been in the middle of those. Right. But so again, the first half of those races, I probably felt the same. It was the same.
Right. So you're getting a halfway point. You go past the college.
Yep.
What's your mindset when you hit the halfway point, and what's your mindset going into the second half, knowing that this is when the race begins?
Yeah, this is when the race begins. Not every marathon, but at Boston, the hills are coming. So you be ready. It's going to get some spots where you're going to have to work. All right. But that's okay, because you put your time in. If you put your time in, and you put your work in. You've done this before. You've trained for it. And then you go. And again, you try to enjoy yourself and soak in the surroundings. And when it gets to the tough spots, it's when the crowd gets the biggest and the most boisterous. Again, that's at Boston. Other marathons, there could be nobody out there cheering for you.
Right. Have you ever had a time when you said, I'm just going to stop?
I have. And absolutely. I've never not finished a marathon, but there's been points where this year in Boston, I walked for a minute at 2 different points. I gave myself permission to walk. I walked through a couple of water stops, extended. But there's been spots where I wanted to stop, and what can happen is you start to physically you're still okay usually, but you start to mentally beat yourself up. And when you start doing that, that's when the race begins to go downhill. So you gotta try to realize that it's gonna be tough. Don't beat yourself up. You'll get this too shall pass. And generally it does. I might slow down. All right. I can accept that. But sometimes, I just work through it. But I've definitely wanted to stop. I mean, stop, like get off the course, stop.
Right. How many Bostons have you done?
I think this year it was 9, I think. All right.
And how,
The official website says 7, but it's 9 because they didn't start counting until before I had run 2 before they started counting, I think.
and how many have you done in total?
I think if I'm right, this last one was 39, I think.
39 marathons.
Total.
Wow.
Yeah. End's coming soon, my friend. The end is coming soon.
Why do you say that? Why do you say that?
I don't know. There's time. There's time. I always think that maybe I'll take a bowling or something like that, Bowling. The shoes are cool. The shoes are cool in bowling.
I want one of the shirts.
Oh, yeah.
What so we track you again. We watch you when you're running. We see the splits you're putting in and what you're going up against. When do you start thinking, okay, the finish is actually accessible? It's there. How many miles away do you start thinking about that?
Well, they always say it's a 10K with a 20-mile warm-up.
Wow.
And so once you hit 20 miles, you realize, okay, now the
game begins.
Now it begins. And in Boston, the 20 miles begins at the bottom of Heartbreak Hill. And so Heartbreak Hill is a long, not quite a mile hill that is long, and it's sort of tiered. You go up and you end up in the middle of Boston College. It's really fun. And so when you finish, it's fun. So after I finish Heartbreak Hill, usually at Boston, now you're at mile 21, you're beginning to descend into the city of Boston. Now I say, okay, you got it. It's just a matter of now you're going to finish.
Right.
The wheels didn't fall off. It's just a matter of how well you're going to finish. You're going to have a real good finish, or you're going to have just an okay finish. So, but in the local marathon I've run, you get on the bike path at the end at about mile 21. So about that spot, I say, okay, we're going to finish today, which is the first positive. It's just a matter of what do I do in the next 5 miles determines how well my time is.
Sure. When you say when the wheels fall off, is that a physical, emotional? I mean, is it physical, mental, or combo platter of both?
It's combo platter. I think, though, the mental, emotional is pushed by the physical. Sure. Everybody's going to get tired.
Sure.
And did you go out too fast? If so, maybe you're now feeling the negative effects of that. And again, that's where you could get to the spot where you can start beating yourself up, which to me cause you to slow down more than just your physical. So, but the wheels fall off, you start beating yourself up, or, I've had times where I've had a real hamstring tightness.
Oh, sure.
And that, so again, caused by running too fast in the beginning.
Oh,
so that's a physical thing that, you just have to work through and the best you can.
Do you know who David Goggins is?
I do know who Goggins is, yes.
So he's run ultra marathons, and he always talks about how the mental emotional wears out, stops well before the body stops, and the body can go on much longer of the body, but your brain goes, no, we can't do this. I'm sure there's got to be some time along the race where you start saying, oh, not so much.
For sure. And the brain, your brain's protecting you, right? But yeah, absolutely. So that mindset, and maybe what you try to impart to other people when, maybe now that people may say, what do you think? I say, okay, the physical is one part, but you have to be prepared for the other part, which you can't be prepared for unless you've been there before.
Right. Do you run with people specifically, or do you run by yourself? What do you do?
Mostly, I enjoy running with people, but mostly since I run before school, I don't have the opportunity to do. But when I do my long runs, usually I do them on a weekend. I try to at least make sure that I run with people for part of it. I enjoy that. The social aspect of running is fun, and not for training as much as just because I enjoy it. I run with the kids, and I coach cross country and track, so I try to run with kids as much as I can when I can, but that's not always easy to do when you're coaching.
When you're at Boston, are you running solo, or do you have a specific person or persons you run with?
Depends. I've been fortunate that many of the years I've run Boston, friends or colleagues or people I train with have been there too. And if you don't start together, you don't run together. But I've even started with friends. This past year, a mom of many of the kids I've coached, who was a real tremendous lady, she was running Boston. And so we went out to the start together, and we started at different times. And after the race was over, we met, and then we met our families. So that's fun. And the year before, I had coached her sister, so I went out to start with her and her sister. So it was a lot of fun running with friends and former athletes of mine, which was, I really enjoyed that.
So when you're running Boston, you plan on running with a huge crowd, but by yourself.
Yeah, for sure. And I like to be social. So when I run a marathon, I like to talk to people as I'm running. You know, sometimes you hook up people for 100 yards or 10 miles. But I like to do that. But just chit chat. Nothing big deal.
How many in a group when you're starting?
The wave, there's 8 waves. I bet you they split them in the 5, 6, 7,000 people in start, and they do it. Boston does 4 different waves.
Right. And so you're in a pack of people.
Yeah, yeah.
And there's all that hustle and bustle of that whole thing, and you got to be careful, and you got to go out and you got to do the whole dodging, everything like that. How long does that last for?
It starts to spread out, but it's never, you never have a free reign. You know what I mean? There's always people. You always have to, in a big marathon, always have to be cognizant. There's lots of people around. It does spread out pretty quickly within the first few minutes of crossing the starting line.
Right.
But then, like in Boston, there's so many people. You always have to be aware. If you're cutting off at a water stop, you got to be aware of who's there, and are you cutting somebody off? Is somebody walking? You got to go around. So there's stuff like that to always be aware of.
Your family follows you, are big supporters of you. Are you able to see them when you're running?
Yeah, it's great. My wife Deanna and our daughter McKenna and her boyfriend came up from Florida. McKenna and her boyfriend came up from Florida, and I generally know where they're going to be. Oh. And so when I generally know where they're going to be and where they're going to be, I begin to look for them, and they were right around mile 25, which at Boston this year is right before Kenmore Square, is when you get in the Fenway Park neighborhood. So they're right there, and it's neat. You begin to look for them, and the mind game is, all right, you got to look good. All right. So when you go by, you're running fast and you look good, so they can take a picture and you yell to you and cheer for you. Then once you get out of sight, man, it's okay for you to
yeah.
Yep.
I was just going to ask you that. There's got to be times when you're running and you're like, I don't want anybody to see me.
Oh, absolutely. And problem is, I have a girl, one of my former track athletes. She goes to Boston College. So I'm always afraid if I'm running up Heartbreak Hill and I, God forbid, walk and she sees me, it's all over. All right. Amount of times I yelled at that girl. Right. And so, and before that, her uncle went there, and he was played pro football, was a student of mine. And so I do know that at certain spots, there's going to be people there. And this year at right at the bottom of Heartbreak Hill was a former athlete, Amsterdam kid who I never knew, and yelled. I turned, and she was right there. So every once in a while, there's a surprise of someone out in the course watching.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. You get to the finish. Are you ready to drop on your knees and thank the dear Lord, or are you excited? What's the emotion? What's the physicality and the emotion at when you cross?
Finish. All right. Finish. Generally, I look left, look right. I give a high five or shake hands to the person finishing me.
Sure.
No idea who it is. I think they super job, right? They deserve a congratulations.
Absolutely.
And big or small marathon, doesn't matter. And then depending what marathon you're in, the size of it, you might have to walk a little bit further to get to where you got to be. Boston being a big one. So initially it's just you're done. So that the whole stress of the race, if you're feeling okay physically, besides being depleted,
sure.
The whole stress is off you, which is great. It's great.
What does depleted feel like?
You know, you feel like that your stiffness begins to, you're not moving anymore. You're just walking slow. And if you sit down at the big races, they say they don't let you. You got to keep moving, unless you need.
What's the big saran wrap they put around you?
It's like a blanket, like saran wrap that's supposed to keep you warm.
Does it?
Yeah.
Or are you so hopped up from it that it doesn't really matter?
Well, this year, about mile 23 or 20, we went through a whole range of weather this year. I started with gloves and a winter hat on. I threw them off because it got muggy out about mile 2. Then about halfway through, we got poured on. Then when I got in the city of Boston, we got poured on again. But I was feeling so good, I said, no, what I'll do, I never did this before. I'm going to take my shirt off, and I'm going to run the last half mile my shirt off. Thankfully, I didn't do that because I finished. I started walking. It was freezing out. And so they put the blanket on you, and then you walk to where you get your stuff where you dropped off. But so initially, you're just happy you finished. And then I go through a time period where you're like, oh, it's like a elation. Wow, I did this. This is fantastic.
Right.
This is great. And then quickly after that, it go down. You know what I mean? You know, you begin for whatever reason. I go down in regards to now I'm beat, but
Absolutely.
Eventually that comes back to where you're more on even keel. So you sort of going through a strange range of emotions, and really, you could be not only physically but emotionally depleted too. Or it doesn't take, it doesn't. You see, you're just emotionally spent too. So
have to be, absolutely have to be. So let's say for a good, 45 minutes to an hour, you got the elation of doing it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Everybody's partying around you. They're getting all hopped up. And then you have to, I would think that would be the big wall then, besides the physical one that you hit at, Heartbreak Hill. But that physical and mental, emotional afterwards has just got to be, that's the tanking right there.
Yeah, you tank, you do. And it's more than a few times I've taken a nap with all my gear on. I don't care. I take my shoes off. Doesn't matter to me. But then, then you have to, you bounce back and then you try to enjoy the fruits of your labor for the rest of the day.
What do you eat or drink afterwards?
Immediately afterwards, not much, because I've had enough water, enough Gatorade, enough. I use a energy gel called Goo.
Sure.
There's all different ones, and so I had enough stuff in me that I really don't want much.
Where do you get those? Where do you carry them?
I usually have a belt or a pouch.
Sure.
And so about every 45 minutes, I take one of those. So I usually take one at the start, maybe 4 throughout the race. And so by the time you finish, your Gatorade, water, Goo, and you're ready for nothing, actually.
Right.
But then later on in the day, I try to get as much grease in my body as I can, wings and cheeseburgers.
Why is that?
I don't know. Just, I guess, because of deprivation beforehand.
So afterwards, so you finished at like what? Let's say 3:00 in the afternoon.
Yeah.
2 in the afternoon. When are you back in human form again? Later on that day.
Well, you finish, you meet your family, blah, blah, you go through all that, you change, 2-3 hours later, you're walking slow and stiff, but otherwise you're good.
What are your feet like after when you?
It's kind of like my mother. She always wants to know what my toes look like. All right. My feet are usually okay. My toes are sometimes bruised up,
Are they?
Yeah, usually my toes. Sometimes I lose a toenail or two in the days after the race.
Oish.
Do
do you wear
blisters and whatnot.
Do you wear a thick sock or
Not really? Nothing special.
Really?
Yeah, nothing special. Lucky socks.
You got lucky ones. And do you what kind of shoes do you wear?
I have always worn Asics brand. It just works for me for whatever reason. I've always run in those forever.
Do you get them exactly your size or maybe a little bit bigger for a race like that?
I get in my size, 8.5.
And how long would you wear a shoe like that for?
I in training, I go through them pretty quick. And I would say they say the lifetime of a shoe is 500 miles, but I try to get rid of them quicker than that. And so if I'm in good training, I'm probably training 200 miles a month, so every couple months, but I rotate shoes also.
Sure. We talked about this before. After you get done with a marathon, same thing as we talk with our patients who've our women who've had babies. How long before you go into your marathon amnesia and you start thinking, oh yeah, I'm gonna go do this again?
Generally, my daughter McKenna will tell you the first thing I say to her when I see her after marathon is I quit. All right. And I always mean it. Believe me, I always mean it. I'm done. This is the last time I'm doing that. I always mean it. I do. Now the lady who
I'm
I
serious
went to
this
start,
time. 39 times. I'm serious.
And the friend I went to the start with this year, she's a mom of 10. And so we were joking.
You got nothing on her, man.
Exactly.
Jeez,
we were joking that we're making that joke. You forget about it. So, pretty much, for example, I would, if I can get in, all right, that's another thing. If my time, which I requalify for Boston, but that doesn't necessarily mean you are accepted into the race. If I could get in, I'll go back to Boston. All right. If I don't get in, it may be a while before I run another marathon. We'll see.
All right. What people should know that Stu did run the Cortland YMCA turkey trot, and he won a turkey.
Big one, big turkey.
You don't get that at Boston, do you?
No, you certainly don't.
And Stu actually took a wrong turn. He and he thought you were in first place. No, the other guys took a wrong turn.
And I thought I was in first place. Today got back on course.
That got on course, and Stu said, when I came past him, he's like, "Wait a minute, what's that guy?" So at this moment, no, you quit. At this moment,
I'll go back to Boston. I will, for sure. If I get in, and I hope I do. If not, then we'll see. Maybe I'll encourage a friend to run one and run with a friend, something like that. I'd like to do something like that where the pressure on the self-imposed pressure on having a really fast race isn't there. Running with a friend, helping them out. That's something I think I'd like to do.
Do you still think about running like a super fast time?
I do. Yeah, absolutely. That's why you train.
Right.
You do. But I don't know. Those days, absolutely think about it. All right. And you train for a specific goal. And didn't quite meet that goal this year, but you have a range of goals.
Well, also, you never know what the weather's going to be too.
Yeah.
What are you physically and mental emotionally like for a couple weeks afterwards?
Well, a lot, because Boston's a thing, so it gets in the local media.
Right.
And they post on a school website. People are very kind and congratulatory, You
get on big podcasts like this.
Yeah, you gotta right. I'm hoping this builds into something,
It'll build into something.
Freakonomics is gonna cost soon.
Oh, a lot of freaks in the Freakonomics. And so
it's nice. You get a lot of people. Like I coach track, so a lot of the coaches are in the running community, so they pay attention. So people are real kind and congratulating you, which is nice. And I wear my medal for 7 months afterwards, so I make sure
of course, I would have it tattooed.
I can't believe it's not on me right now. Right.
What? And when's the next time after Boston? How many days before you put the shoes back on again?
This year, Boston was on Monday. I ran on Friday, but nice and slow and short. I ran on Friday and Saturday. I took this Sunday off, and I put a little bit more mile. Today was I ran an hour today. It's the longest I've run since Boston. Nice slow hour. Easy.
Awesome. And do you look back at some of the races and said, I could have, I should have at this point? And
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. If I made a better decision or if I didn't beat myself up at this point, yeah. And I look back at a couple of them and say to myself, maybe you should have stopped because, you weren't doing yourself any good by finishing that day. But
Huh.
yeah, definitely.
And how do you think running marathons has helped in life?
Well, there's the fitness aspect. I
Absolutely.
think, I think that, I'm 58 now, and I think I'm a pretty fit 58 years old. When I get my physical every year, the doctor says, just do what you've been doing. Whatever you've been doing, keep it up. So that's good. It's opened me up to a nice community of people that I never would have met. It's given me an opportunity to participate in some events, but also, um, that old goal setting and keeping motivation over time and being able to work through difficult things, I think helps carry over to other things. Oh man, this is a tough day. Well, you've been here before
Right.
because you were out there, a year and a half ago, and it was 20 degrees out and the wind was blowing and you didn't stop that day. This is not worse than that. Something like that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's great stuff. And how cool is it that you have able to pass on the legacy of running to students too?
It's fun. It's fun. I the best times I've had at Boston are when a couple times kids I coached have run Boston, and I've had a couple of the guys I coach finish in the top Americans a couple of different years. So that's
Really?
pretty neat. Yeah, I've been pretty fortunate to coach some pretty good kids,
Wow.
and they've done well in their post high school career, including Boston. So that's pretty cool. I've been, you know, that's been great.
That's absolutely fantastic. Our guest today on the Empire Longevity podcast has been actually my cugino, my cousin Stuart Palczak, all the way from Amsterdam, New York, who brought us into the mindset of a marathon runner.
Can I mention one last thing? It's that one of the things that you make sacrifice. You talked about what goes into it. The sacrifices you make.
Sure.
Are not only your own life, but the sacrifice you make in not spending time with people that you normally would. And so, for me, running often is a very selfish pursuit. Training for a marathon it's a very selfish pursuit. And I've been fortunate that the people around me have been very supportive in regarding. And that's one of the things regarding that. That's one of the things you think about as you're at a tough time in a race. You've paid your dues on this. You've sacrificed a lot. And so have other people. And so you try to draw on that. And sometimes I don't tell anybody this. So hopefully the millions of the podcast won't share it. I often write, initials of family members or friends who, maybe are no longer with us.
Sure.
Just as a thought that, by doing this, you're honoring them too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You carry a little bit of them with you along the race too.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's something you draw upon when you're running.
Absolutely.
You got a lot of time to think when you're running a marathon, believe me.
Well, I don't do much thinking anyway, so I don't know if I'd be doing it then either. That's absolutely fantastic stuff, man. And how many cannolis do you have after the race?
Listen, that's the only reason I want to go to Boston, so I go to Mike's Pastries in the North End. That is worth it. And I'll tell you, the line at Mike's Pastries is always long, but that's worth it too.
Cannoli fueled marathon runner.
Damn right. That's worth it.
That's the best right there. Stu, I appreciate your time. I love your expertise, and I look forward to seeing you real soon, man.
I look forward to it very much so. Very much. Thank you.
That's my cousin Stuart Palczak from Amsterdam. The longevity of a long distance runner. That is a longevity game right there, man. I appreciate your time, man.
Thank you.